Hello and welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteus and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on the topics from across the world. As the Trump administration's tariff strategy reshapes global trade, key questions emerge around US economic intent, whether it's rebalancing trade, decoupling from rivals, or asserting dominance. With new deals struck with the UK, Japan and Vietnam and a framework agreement with the European Union, are we witnessing a coherent policy or a series of tactical wins? What does this mean for global supply chains, investor confidence and the future of multilateralism? Let's discuss all this and more with our guests, Professor Guido Cozzi. Professor Guido Cozzi, a leading macroeconomist at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, holds a PhD in economics from New York University. He's also published extensively on topics including economic growth, innovation, monetary policy and political economy. With a strong expertise in dynamic modelling and quantitative research, he has also consulted for major institutions and industry associations. His academic work focuses on the macroeconomic impacts of technological change, intellectual property rights, and long-term structural trends in advanced economies. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Cozzi. Pleasure to have you on the show. Let's dive straight in. When we talk about US trade policy, this year in particular, how would you describe the Trump administration's overall tariff strategy? Is this about correcting trade imbalances, decoupling from rivals, or reasserting US economic dominance?
Well, it is obviously a bit of the three. Of course, the first motivation is to rebalance trade imbalances, for example, those with China or with Europe. But at the same time, they are also reframing the geopolitical environment globally. Because we can see that different trade agreements reflect the different geopolitical positions of the United States. So in a way, it is still related to strategy and dominance, if you want to call it this way, reaffirming the role of the United States as a coordinator of the global economic process, which makes differences between those who are friends and those who are not.
Now, Professor, Donald Trump has some would say, turbulent relationship with the European Union. However, Washington and Brussels have announced a framework deal to de-escalate their trade tensions. In your view, how meaningful is this EU-US agreement in terms of structural economic change, and what are the main sticking points that remain?
Well, of course, it is not a complete treatment. It is just a framework. I wouldn't describe this as a peace treaty, but rather as a ceasefire. So it restores a bit of more confidence in the markets, because uncertainty is the biggest problem for markets, and opens the way to improvements. However, we should, on the one side, be aware that there are structural issues that cannot easily get solved right now, because if the United States keeps importing so much from Europe and creates a surplus for Europe, this is not gonna be deleted with a few signatures or a little increase in the tariffs. On the other side, Europe is a strategic ally of the United States, especially if we consider the long-term trends in which China keeps growing like this, will in a quarter century have a GDP level that is comparable to that of the United States plus Europe. So the United States needs Europe, and this framework is reestablishing some space for a more healthier rebalancing and a long-term geopolitical alliance.
Now, Professor Cozzi, in contrast with this framework, the US has finalized individual deals with the UK, Japan and Vietnam. Do you see these agreements represent a coherent economic strategy, or are they more tactical wins meant to show momentum?
Well, both, because the tactical wins are clearly in the details. So, for example, if the United States promises to Vietnam to reduce the tariff from what was threatened in exchange for more penetration by the United States exports. Clearly, this is a tactical win. On the other side, the countries you have described are countries that are geopolitically interesting or friends, or in the case of the United States, I would say a very close relative. In the case of the United Kingdom, I would say a very close relative of the United States. These are treaties that represent a tailored solution for countries that are geopolitically important.
We now move on to the big one, US-China trade relations. Tariffs, pauses and resume negotiations suggest a thaw in US-China trade relations here. But is this a durable shift or just a temporary recalibration?
This is a temporary calibration. With China, clearly we cannot say that they are allies or friends too much anymore. So they are the main rivals at the moment, both geopolitically and economically. On the other side, the United States still need the Chinese goods, even though it is moving away. It is trying to reshore, to friendshore much more, for example, to India. So India is at the moment clearly taking over the foreign direct investment that previously would go from the United States to China. So this treaty is more like a temporary truce, again, to mitigate uncertainty in the global financial markets and to guarantee a little bit more reassurance and stability. However, this is still leaving the main problems open.
We stay in the Indo-Pacific. There are ongoing talks between Washington and Seoul as well. What's at stake in this bilateral relationship, especially regarding technology, autos and defense-related industries?
Absolutely. South Korea is a very important ally, not only geopolitically, but also from an economic point of view. 80% of the most important semiconductors used in the United States come from South Korea. So for the semiconductor industry, for batteries and electric vehicles, and for defense technologies, South Korea is a very important ally. So what I expect is a very careful management of this relationship that would guarantee a treaty or at least some agreement that will make everyone happy, both parties, and reassure a more stable supply chain and long-term technological security for both countries, because also South Korea needs exports, and the United States is a major importer of its technological goods.
Now let's turn over to the global south. Trump has made overtures towards Russia in some ways, while BRICS nations are deepening economic ties. How might the US trade strategy shift in response to a more assertive, coordinated global south?
Well, this is more on the painful side for the United States because the United States gross domestic product at the moment, in real terms, is less than 20% of the entire world, whereas for BRICS, it is close to 30%. So BRICS is a reality that the United States cannot just ignore or dismiss, because it's getting overall more important than the United States itself in terms of GDP. The fortune of the United States is that BRICS is very heterogeneous, as we know very well. There are big differences in terms of geopolitical stance, for example, from Russia and India. But still, it requires a very careful and realistic assessment of its increasing importance, also vis-a-vis weakening of the dollar, not only in terms of value, but also in terms of its authority worldwide as a reserve currency, which, by the way, is negatively affected by Trump's denigration of the Federal Reserve Chairman at the moment.
Professor Cozzi, given your analysis of the current situation, are these tariff actions and bilateral deals actually redrawing global supply chains? If so, who stands to gain and who loses? Is this shifting landscape?
Well, as a macroeconomist, I would say that what wins is stability, because we are moving to a multilateral reality rather than a completely globalized reality. However, the big loser is efficiency, because by fragmenting and making trade multipolar, we will face less economies of scale, because we will see a world in which groups of countries trade among themselves. So big losers is efficiency, because globalization is more efficient. In the current situation, the winner is stability. Then between the countries, different countries, among different countries, the winners and losers are pretty dynamic. I don't think the United States at the moment are gaining from an economic point of view by these tariffs, because they are reducing their opportunities to import goods that are probably done cheaper and better than the United States. So this is a big loss in terms of efficiency of internal production. However, it is gaining some momentum in terms of geopolitical stance, especially in a period in which the United States as a global actor is on the decline.
Yes, and penultimately, from Wall Street to emerging markets, how are investors responding to this flurry of trade activity?
Well, investors at the moment are more concerned with uncertainty. So this start and stop character of the trade talks is disturbing the markets. Risk premia have increased. We see some spreads, bond spreads arising quite clearly. So what the markets want is declining uncertainty. So hopefully in August or maybe in October, depending on the talks, including those with India, which may materialize in autumn, in their sixth round maybe, the markets will pacify as soon as they have more certainty, more more reassurance of this new world in which they will operate.
Yes, and finally, looking at the bigger picture, what's your assessment of the long-term impact of the Trump-era trade policy on global economic order? Are we headed towards a more fragmented, bloc-driven system?
Yes, we are moving into a more fragmented situation, and also another important difference is that we are seeing trade more and more entangled in geopolitical and security issues. So it is no more a growth factor, which was characterized in the era of globalization, but it is rather a security, defense, and geopolitical factor, which obviously comes to the detriment of efficiency.
Thank you, Professor Cozzi, for speaking to us on Focal Length. Pleasure having you on the programme. And with that, it's a wrap on this episode. For more international news updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.